Hello, everyone. Everyone should be able to hear me. I believe so. Welcome, hello, and welcome to the release party for The Nature of Things Essays of a Tapestry Weaver by Tommye McClure Scanlin. My name is Jillian Murphy. I'm the assistant managing editor for the UNG Press. We're so excited to share this wonderful tapestry memoir with you today. We're very excited. So during the event, please keep your mics muted just to prevent background noise. Zoom will automatically follow whoever is speaking, but we encourage you to pin Tommye so you can always see her, which is the little three dots by her name. Please submit your questions for the Q&A at the end in the chat feature. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the event to Pamela Shashant, head of UNG's Department of Visual Arts, to introduce Tommye.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to introduce Tommye Scanlin on this momentous occasion, the publication of The Nature of Things. The collected essays on her art and life are part memoir, recollection of moments and moods, events and achievements, and part guide. Now, before Tommye reacts in horror to my suggestion that she intended her book as a guide, or that she herself is a guide, let me give some context. I have known Tommye since I arrived in Dahlonega 15 years ago, and I have felt her hand gently guiding me throughout the years, as she guided so many others in her role as artist educator at UNG from 1972 to 2009. She describes her journey to become one of the first faculty members at North Georgia College in the Department of Fine Arts, as in large part thanks to others showing her the path and helping her to take the first steps. But she traveled the road and completed her Bachelor of Art Education in 1969 and her Master of Art Education in 1973, both at UGA. As a faculty member in the Department of Fine Arts, Tommye was always aware of the many roles teachers play in addition to explaining and demonstrating. She was her students' escort as they explored their artistic voices. She was their mentor during their creative growth at the college, and she was a model for how to achieve their professional goals. By the time I arrived at North Georgia College and State University, Tommye had retired as full professor and department head, but was still guiding one more generation of weaving students in their studies, which she did until 2009. She also acted as my counselor, making gentle suggestions and sometimes nudging, which I figured out at some point was her very understated way of steering me clear of faux pas and major disasters both. During that time and since, she was also devoting herself to teaching workshops and longer study programs at Arrowmont School of Arts and Crafts, John C. Campbell Folk School, and Penelon School of Crafts, among other craft-based schools. And, oh joy, the luxury, she was creating her own artwork. After nearly 40 years guiding others, Tommye was free to dedicate her energy and expertise to her photography, drawing, painting, and ultimately her weaving. Which brings us back to the nature of things. Within its essays, she writes about subjects such as, quote, how to look beyond surface appearance in my search for the essence of things, unquote. Becoming comfortable working through uncertainty and seemingly aimless meandering, as she calls it, the flux that is part of making art, and truly seeing the small things in nature that call to her, spark her imagination, and populate her imagery. While in her book, Tommye is writing about discoveries, frustrations, sorrows, and accomplishments in her own life. Putting those memories and reflections on paper, they become a guide for others, not giving directions, but offering opportunities to consider, to expand, to lean in a new direction. It is with great pleasure that I introduce Tommye Scanlin.
unmute myself. There we go. And to say, I don't know if anybody can see me because I can't see myself. Can you see me?
Yes.
Hello to everybody. I really, really appreciate your being here. But first off, Pam, I can hardly speak because I am just absolutely teared up with that wonderful introduction. It's hard to know what to say thank you. You've been a mentor to many people, and you will continue to be so for many, many years. I went to North Georgia College as a student. I came back as an instructor, and I stayed for many years. And North Georgia is where my heart is and always will be. And so thank you for that wonderful introduction. Also, thank you to everybody at the UNG Press. It's with a really full heart that I say thank you to BJ Robinson and Jillian Murphy and Corey Parson. And I'm just very thrilled that they were willing to take on this book and be my first publisher at North Georgia since North Georgia College and State University, and now the University of North Georgia means so much to me through the years. I also am very, very grateful for everybody who's encouraged me over the years in my artistic pursuits, and terribly grateful to everybody who has put up with me as an instructor. I see a few of you in the grid there, and it's great. I can't tell you how much I've learned from students through the years. There are a number of people mentioned for appreciation in the beginning of my book, and I know I've left so many out, and I'm sorry about that. But it's always been a wonderful thing to work with people and to get to know people and to learn from people in many different ways. And I'll have to say, I wouldn't have been able to do the artwork and the variety of stuff that I've been engaged in through the years, or spend the last 2.5 years collecting my thoughts and images into this manuscript without the patience and encouragement of a very special person, my husband, Tommye Scanlin. So what I want to do now is to show you some images from the book and to do a few readings. And in the images, I'll be also showing you a few others. Let's see if I can get to my screen. A few others that aren't in the book. There we go. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So the nature of things. Essays of a Tapestry Weaver. I grew up in the mountains of North Georgia, and a few years ago, as I was preparing a presentation about my work, it occurred to me that my primary source for inspiration has always been found in the world in which I grew up, the fields and valleys of the southern Appalachian Mountains. I credit my mother, Hazel Teague McClure, for being my first guide to the beauty that these surroundings hold. She had often described the latest wildflowers that she saw on an afternoon walk. After she died, the flower identification book I'd given her came back to me. In it, I saw her notes sprinkled throughout the margins of the pages, noting where and when she'd spotted particular flowers. That happens to be the road that she would walk up and down almost every day while she was still able. It was a gravel road for many years, and it was the one my sister and I ran up and down, skinned our knees several times as we fell in the gravel. But anyway, so both my sister and I were raised with her expectation to simply do the best we could in whatever we pursued, and each accomplishment was celebrated with us. My sister and I chose different paths, both in the teaching field. She loved sports and became an early childhood physical education teacher. I loved art and became an art teacher. Mother was proud of both of us. My journey to becoming an artist began simply and has taken modest paths. I haven't traveled extensively to experience a wider world. Most of my years have been spent close to the mountains where I grew up. Every day, I still find something to see and wonder about and to respond to in a visual way, maybe in a photograph, a sketch, a painting, or a tapestry. There's a beauty in the limits of time and place. Maybe Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz said it best. There's no place like home. And so I wanted to write to describe the small things that I've found where I've lived for most of my life and the artworks that came from those observations. Once upon a time, an introduction. As long as I can remember, I've wanted to draw pictures. As a child, I heard others say that I was the class artist, and that encouraged me to think I could be a real artist when I grew up. What I thought an artist did was pretty limited since there wasn't an art program in the rural North Georgia schools I attended. Now that's the two-room school building behind this class of 1954-55 that you see in the slide. My second grade picture is overlaid on top of that class, and you'll notice me on the right-hand side standing next to the teacher. And that year, the next year, we moved to a little bit larger school, so I didn't attend a two-room school my whole time. But we still didn't have an art program in the rural North Georgia schools I attended. Even so, the kids in our class happily cut out stenciled holiday decorations for each season that we colored with crayons and taped to windows and doors. We drew with pencils on our lined notebook paper to illustrate reports. And in our spare time, several of us girls drew horses and pretty dresses, while some of the boys filled pages with elaborate battle scenes between cowboys and Indians. One Christmas under the tree, I found the John Nagy Learn to Draw kit that included a pad of manila paper, some sticks of charcoal, and the book of art lessons. I drew every example in the book many times over and used notebook paper once the drawing paper ran out. The next year, Santa brought a couple of paint by numbers sets, and how exciting those were. I loved to fill in the printed outlines on the canvas board with a brush loaded with that juicy, heady smelling oil paint. Drawing with charcoal and painting with oil paint, those were the things an artist did, I decided. So the two charcoal drawings you see on the lower left, those were done when I was around 14, I think. The two paint by numbers sets of horses, probably when I was 11 or 12, maybe 13. I wound up at North Georgia College to study elementary education. I did not want to be an elementary education major. I wanted to be an art person, whatever an art person happened to be. At North Georgia, I was an elementary education major because financially we needed to have assistance for me to go to college, and I happened to get a education degree seeking scholarship. And in the course of doing the classes for elementary education, I happened upon Bob Owens, whose picture you see. Bob was teaching some art ed classes for the School of Education at the time. There was no art program at North Georgia. Meeting Bob Owens, taking classes with him, and expressing to him my desire to be an artist, but I had to be in an education major. He said, "Why don't you transfer schools and major in art education?" Oh my goodness, what was that? I had no clue that such a thing existed. So because of Bob Owens, he directed me as an informal advisor and mentor to the degree program I wound up in and became an art educator because of him. And I'm forever grateful for meeting him at that early time. So the making of a teacher. I guess it's ironic that someone who said she didn't want to be an education major in college spent the better part of a lifetime going into classrooms and standing in front of students, young ones, old ones, and all ages in between. Although I didn't know it at the time, it was really teaching. It wasn't teaching. I was resisting when I entered college as an elementary education major. Instead, I feared that making art wasn't going to be part of my future. Yes, I now know that one could be an artist while occupied with another job for their livelihood. At the time, I just couldn't see how that was possible. The art education program at UGA, University of Georgia, that Bob guided me to opened up the way to be intimately connected to the making side of art. Not only were art education theory and practice courses part of the curriculum, but also studio art classes were required. And those were most important to me. The 3 years I spent in middle and high school art classrooms right after graduation offered many pieces of the larger teaching puzzle I began to put together. Each day I faced teenage students who were either eager to jump into art making or unsure and unafraid to try things. Then there were a few goof-offs, the kids who were putting up with the system while they did as little as they could to get by. I began to see that almost anyone could become motivated to make something in the art class, depending on the approach I use when presenting the project. I also realized that I needed to say the same thing in different ways. Some students could easily see what to do with the demonstration. Others had to have a demo and verbal instructions. And a few only needed to refer to a handout. Some would rather plunge right in and try it their own way. Looking back on my teaching style, I realized that most of it didn't come from the classes in art education in the university degree program. Instead, much of what I understood about teaching came from having a few exceptional teachers as my role models. Each of those had calm, patient ways that showed how they cared both about their students and the processes of conceptualizing and making art. I've already mentioned Bob Owens as one of those important teachers, but also there was Edwina Bringle. You see Edwina on the right standing with me and one of my students, Allie Dudley. Edwina is who I encountered first at Penland School of Craft in about 1975, and she began my path into the wonderful world of weaving. Archie Brennan and Susan Martin Maffei both have been my tapestry guides through the years. Like Bob Owens, unfortunately, Archie Brennan is no longer in the world with us, but their bright lights continue to motivate me and many other people every day. I walk into each new teaching experience filled with a sense of anticipation about where the journey we're about to embark upon will take us, even if it's only a few days we'll be spending together, immersed in the wonders of image making and tapestry weaving. Finding the way to tapestry. I've mentioned there wasn't art instruction in the schools I attended in my youth, so my early art making experiences were limited. The Learn to Draw kit introduced me to charcoal, and most of the drawings I made in high school were done with that medium. As a college student, I was introduced to other visual art forms that offered many more ways to create images. I began to understand that fabrics and fiber could be artistic disciplines with a variety of methods and techniques. Of course, quilts were familiar because we had many of those at home made by women in the family. I also knew about weaving on a loom, but didn't know anyone who did the craft. Discovering that there were contemporary artists working with fabric and fiber in creative ways was a revelation, and I wanted to explore this newly discovered creative avenue as much as possible. So what I'm flipping here flipping through here in these slides are some of the things that I was doing in the 1970s and the early 1980s. Because I love drawing and painting so much, though, I continued to be drawn to image making with the fiber and fabric methods that I was exploring. So these are some examples of what I was doing before I was doing tapestry. In 1988, because of a very wonderful summer of serendipity, I finally began to weave tapestry. And now, over 50 years since my first real art class, I still want to be an artist. And 3 decades after beginning to weave tapestry, I still find it to be a challenging medium in which to work. In spite of those challenges, the beautiful surface quality of traditional hand-woven tapestry still draws me. I know that my childhood's heart's desire to be an artist is truly being fulfilled with every pass of the yarn when I weave tapestry. So a bit of a closer look at tapestry. I explain it a bit in the book. Just going to talk a little bit about it here, looking at a few slides. Tapestry is woven on a loom. Various kinds of looms can be used. I use upright looms of different sizes. This is the largest loom that I have, a 60-inch wide one. The thread on the loom is called the warp. What you weave with is called weft. Various colors can weave back and forth, and bit by bit, the tapestry builds up. I find every stage of weaving a tapestry to be both physically and mentally engaging. Although my thoughts may occasionally wander along with music or an audiobook, I have to snap right back to the reality of the tapestry as my eyes and hands demand the attention to detail and process. This is part of the complexity of the simple plain weave of tapestry that continues to both amaze and delight me every day. Seeking inspiration. Designs, where do they come from? What will spark an idea that will develop into a tapestry? I continue to find myself challenged to discover ways to tap into creative process and find inspiration for art making. I search for ideas, and once I find them, I'm then confronted with how to turn those ideas into artworks. Early on, I realized I was especially drawn to the work of artists who use the natural world as subjects. Some of the artists whose work strongly called to me were Dutch still life painters, and their images filled with lush and vibrant plants. Vincent van Gogh's turbulent views of the world, Charles Birchfield's watercolors depicting symbolically the scenes and sounds of nature, Georgia O'Keeffe's beautiful celebrations of small things, and Alex Katz's massively enlarged views of grasses, flowers, or trees. Poems by Billy Collins and Wendell Berry expressing their encounters with nature also moved me. Emily Dickinson's writings held eloquent insights into her observations of the natural world that went far beyond simple descriptions. Quotes like Byron Herbert Reese's, "I know a valley green with corn where Notley's waters roil and run," find their way into my thoughts when I walk in the woods or fields of North Georgia. Time out to take a look. Walking in the woods delights me, but I'm not a bold hiker. I don't seek the wild places for my walks. Instead, joy from these walks comes when I'm on land that's familiar and safe. Pardon me. Meandering hikes offer plenty to contemplate any time of the year. One of the things I wonder about is what a walk in these woods would have been like 200 years ago. So different in many ways, and yet it would have been much the same in others. The trees would have been huge, like the few that remain in old growth forest, like the Joyce Kilmer Memorial Forest in North Carolina. No contrails from passing jets would be seen or four-wheelers heard, but when I walk amidst the canopy of leaves in summer, the buzz of insects and the melody of birdsong filling the air, just as they surely did in the 1800s. In late October and November, the brilliant colors of fall visually shout against the bluest skies in the world. In winter, my feet crunch in the frost covering the ground and my breath precedes me on the trail. My heart hurts from the sublime beauty of the fresh, new greens of spring. There's some favorite places in these mountains, and a place along the creek that my husband and I go to periodically, a friend's property in Western North Carolina. The Hambidge Center in extreme North Georgia, and the Lillian E. Smith Center. All of these places are ones that I return to whenever I can. As I roam through the woods, I wonder how I might possibly represent some of the beauty I'm observing. I know the images I'm capable of making will only dimly represent what I see and feel. I realize that noticing is the first step in many that I'll take on my way from a fleeting observation to finished tapestry. Many hours of making and refining images are ahead of me as I attempt to create a tapestry that will contain the essence of the place, the time, and my feelings of the experience, brief though it may have been. The woods and valleys of the Blue Ridge Mountains of Southern Appalachia give me a wealth of subject matter to contemplate. My hope is that something of the sense of wonder and gratitude I hold for the nature of things breathes through the spirit of the tapestries I weave. Small things. Intimate features of the world around us. Those are found in the exquisite details of small things. The trees, rather than the forest, are what I see first, but then I want to look even closer. I'm constantly amazed by the similar shapes of the thousands of leaves on the oak tree in the yard. And yet every one of those leaves of the same tree have subtle variations. Pattern and repetition abound in nature's forms, but with remarkable variety within the sameness. Spirals. In the springtime a few years ago, my husband and I were staying at our getaway in the woods. One morning, I decided to walk along the edge of the nearby creek, and on the way, I noticed a tiny spiraling green form that had emerged from the leaf litter. When I stopped to take a closer look, I suddenly realized it was a fiddlehead with its furled fern frond coming up. As I looked around, I saw there were hundreds of fiddleheads almost carpeting the forest floor as they pushed their way through the dead leaves from the past season. Why hadn't I spotted those before? I've been out in the woods many times, but I'd never noticed the renewal of ferns as they emerged as fiddleheads. I was entranced and wanted to design a tapestry to record my discovery of this tiny miracle of life. Immediately, I started taking photos and was soon back in the woods with sketchbook and pencils. After many studies, I began weaving a tapestry that is called Spring Profusion. Woven in 2008, it was the first of those that came from my fiddlehead obsession. The title encapsulated my feelings about coming upon that first fiddlehead and suddenly becoming aware of all the others surrounding it. Those are a few more of the fiddlehead tapestries that I've done through the years. Feathers. I once heard that birds are descendants of dinosaurs. For some reason, that thought captivated me. Each news report of another finding in the fossil record showing a link between those ancient ancestors and the birds that are among us today is thrilling to me. I love to think of the crows that are in the yard right now as distant cousins of a velociraptor. Crows especially fascinate me. I watch them stalk through the grass, bodies moving back and forth with a husky rhythm as they pick up walnuts and pecans. But it seems that as soon as I begin to watch them from my window, they up and fly away. Do they know I'm watching? If they do, how do they sense my attention? I make no movement other than to glance up, and then off they go. Do they have extrasensory perception to alert them to my notice? One afternoon, I heard the caws of many crows in the pecan tree next to the house. I've been trying to see if I could sketch some of the birds when they would be occupied with their nut harvesting. I rushed to the window with pencil and sketch pad and sat down, and soon I was ready to draw, and off they flew. I sat there waiting for them to return, and of course they didn't. Finally, I began to notice that there were many other small birds in the branches busily pecking at insects in the bark. That particular lesson from the crows perhaps was be patient, wait for the unexpected. Stones. Stones speak to me, not in words, but in images. I'm not sure when I first began to notice stones, but I remember as a child that I would collect pieces of mica and quartz when I was searching for arrowheads around my home. Later, I spent a summer as a counselor at a camp for girls in Rabun County, Georgia. When out exploring, we would often find small pieces of amethyst and garnets embedded in quartz in the nearby road banks. As I collected stones, I noticed the textures and colors and loved to see the distinct shadows made by the edges of stones when strong sunlight struck one side. These particular stones in the old stone chimney ruin are especially significant to me. These are from the Lillian E. Smith Center. Lillian Smith was a mid-20th century civil rights and social justice advocate. She's buried beside that stone chimney. Her grave marker has a quote from one of her writings that I've found very meaningful through the years. Death can kill a man. That is all it can do to him. It cannot end his life because of memory. I did several paintings of the stones of that chimney. And as I worked on the paintings, the quote from that grave marker kept running through my mind like a mantra, especially the ending phrase, because of memory. After returning home, I designed a tapestry based on one of the paintings. The tapestry I called Because of Memory, not simply as a reminder of the inspiring moments I've had at the center, but more because I believe that memory is held in stones as well as in human minds. The memory of ages and forces shows in the stones and is more permanent than the memories of humans can ever be. Threads of time. For many years, I thought about the concept of time and how important it is in making a tapestry. Would there be, pardon me, my slideshow has decided it wants a life of its own, so I'm going to be flipping back and forth here. So time is important to me in the making of tapestry. Would there be a way to visually represent the passing of time? And in 2008, I decided to give it a try, weaving each day a small increment that would be determined as it was woven. That's me standing with that first 2008 tapestry. That experiment was the beginning of what I came to call my tapestry diaries. In 2009, this was the whole year. Each of those little sections of color is represented a different day of the year. In 2015, I continued to do a small section each day of a different color, but decided to add a pictorial imagery throughout the month. 2019, Sticks and Stones was my tapestry diary, and this is the one that's underway this year. Doubts and decisions. The last essay in the book is about doubts and decisions, obviously. I've used journals for many years, and I have some quotes from those that I included in the essay. 2008, do I have anything to say, anything in my work that would cause a viewer to think about something other than just the visual impression of the work? Do I need to say anything at all? November 8, 2010, do I have enough years of time? Don't get discouraged. I can only do what I can do and nothing more. Through the details, I can better understand and cope with the immense complexity of the work. In these few fragments of journal entries spanning 2 decades, few of the journals there, one can read some of my struggles with self-doubt. Of course, not all of the journal writings over the years are about indecisions and uncertainties. I've also reflected on in-progress artwork and frequently made planning notes for upcoming teaching engagements, as well as writing comments to myself once those classes are underway. I've written poems and wondered about many things. Looking back, I can see that much of what's in the journals has been concerning my decision-making process. Usually an affirmative statement, often about a breakthrough of concept or composition that I've reached, followed an entry like the ones that I've just read. I realize now if I've taken to heart all of the uncertainties noted in the journals, I never would have created anything. I finally recognized that the ebb and flow of creative energy I've felt through the years is exactly that, the evidence of the cycle of growth and decline and growth once more. Even though I don't exactly welcome the downside, I now accept that this cycle is one that offers both the high and low points in my art making abilities. The last part of the book are appendices. One is about tapestry basics, and I discuss using a simple frame loom and basic steps for getting started. There are quite a number of great books about tapestry instruction out in the world, as well as video and online courses. So my introduction in the book is simply an introduction. I do have a resource list in the back that gives a number of the things that one can go to. So I have a few diagrams that I've drawn like this. And I wanted to show you a very simple pipe loom that I was putting together with the help of Sam at Home Depot. I wanted to assemble it there before I brought it home to make sure I had all the parts and pieces. So Sam was very kind and helpful and didn't mind my opening up packages and screwing T's and elbows together. And he seemed to be very curious about what I was doing after all. So I hope you enjoy seeing the world through my eyes and reading my words in the nature of things, if that's what you would choose to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tommye, for sharing that. It really was, everyone, such a joy to work on this book and be able to see the world and see art through Tommye's eyes. So we're going to go ahead and transition into the Q&A portion of the event. So Tommye, what projects are you working on now? What in nature is currently inspiring you?
I guess I'm still...
You are still unmuted.
Okay. Well, I'm working on getting some sampling done for a class I'll be doing at John Campbell Folk School in their traditional mentorship program that's coming up. I'll be having a week there in October 4th through the 10th. The program starts this coming weekend, in fact. So it's going to be an exciting opportunity. The folk school, like many places, had to cancel regular classes this year. So it's great that the folk school's being able to do that. And I think I see Pam Howard. Do I see Pam Howard here? Hey, Pam. Pam will be the first instructor for the traditional craft mentorship program. So I'm excited about that.
So what's one of the most important lessons you've learned from your art teachers?
Gosh, be patient and listen and try to understand what's being asked, not what I think is being asked. That's hard to do. You know, when a teacher goes in, there's usually an agenda in your mind about what you would like to get across. Sometimes the students' needs meet that agenda. Other times there are other needs as well, or instead of. So be patient and listen, I think is what I try to do. Don't always do it, but it's what I try to do.
Well, I think the obvious amount of support you've gotten from past students shows you have successfully done that.
They're all great. They really are.
So, what is your favorite tapestry that is included in the book?
I think almost my favorite would be the flight piece, the feathers. It was one that meant a lot to me as I was weaving it, and it continues to mean. In fact, it's right there on the wall behind me. It's one that my husband liked a lot after it was finished, and that meant a lot to me. Not that it necessarily needs to, but he has a good eye, and I respect his aesthetic eye very much. And so I took it off the loom. He and my niece were there, saw it laying on the floor, and Thomas didn't say anything. And I finally said, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "It's sublime." And I said, "What?" I thought he was putting me on, but he really did have that response to it. So for several reasons, that piece is one of the favorites of mine, and his response is one of those.
It's a really beautiful piece. Which do you find harder to weave, flowers, feathers, or stones?
It depends. It depends on the whole overall design. Yeah. Anything can be as complex or not as you want it to be.
So how did you decide to include the chapter about your uncertainties?
I just felt like it needed to be there. It has been part of my making process all my time of making. I remember when I was in college doing a lot of writing about my doubts, and I have always done that. And I did want to include those, but I also wanted to include the last paragraphs that I finally realized the doubts weren't the only thing. The doubts are there, but there are ways out of it. You've got to keep working. You've got to keep thinking forward, moving forward, doing stuff. And I've heard from a few people who've read it, and they said they appreciated those words being in there. It's, being an artist or being anything, really, being a human being isn't all fun and games. There are lots of doubts we have every day in our lives.
And that certainly comes through your art. It'd be wrong to deny that part of it. Absolutely. So what struggles did you experience in trying to write about tapestry, which is a visual medium?
That's a really good question, because I think writing about tapestry is related to weaving tapestry. You spend so much time with a piece that there are a lot of thoughts that go through your head, that go through my head at least, when I'm weaving it, that relate to the imagery, relate to the reason that the image is being made. And I think in thinking through those reasons for making the tapestry, I think the words came from that, or can come from that.
So have you ever considered redoing an old tapestry?
Yes, and I have only redone one that I did, that was one of my very first early tapestries. I redid it probably 10, 12 years later in a different scale. And my technique was much better than it was the first time around. And I think I made a better tapestry the second time around. Other than that, I really haven't redone an image. That's the only one that I've really done specifically image-wise. But I revisit ideas. Feathers I've gone to several times. Flowers I've gone to many times. So leaves, I've been obsessed with leaves in the last 3-4 years or so. So I've woven leaves quite a lot. And so I returned to thematic ideas.
All right, so for our last question, what piece of encouragement would you give to others who want to write books about their art?
Start writing.
Best advice.
Yeah, start writing and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. I've got, when I was in college, I would start a term paper the night before it was due. I don't know if anybody else has done that or not, haha. I would use avoidance a lot to keep from delving into something, but with the writing I've done for this book and for the other book that's in the works with Schiffer Publications, I have written and rewritten and rewritten many times over. So one of the things that I tell people in my classes about their art making is, I can't see inside your head, and you can't do your tapestry inside your head. You've got to weave it. You've got to do it. So the same thing I've found is with writing. I can't just think the words. I have to start writing and then go back through, reread, write again, rewrite, and then turn things over to trusted editors like you and Pam and Margot. I see Margot there. I don't know if Sharon is there. Nancy Peacock, Carol Paulsgrove, people whose eye and minds I trust deeply, to take a look at my words and to, with honesty and compassion, give me good advice. So the advice to somebody writing about their work, write, do it.
That's always the hardest part of writing, no matter what genre you're in. Well, thank you, Tommye, so much for sharing your work with us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm just going to share my screen really quick. So you can buy the book from any major retailer, or you can buy it from our local independent bookstore, Bear Book Market, or request it from your favorite independent bookstore and ask for them to order it. We're so happy that all of you were able to join us today. Thank you so much. And this event will actually be available at the University Press's website sometime next week. And our website is ung.edu/university-press. And that is where you can find more information about the book, a sample chapter, reviews, and all sorts of wonderful things. So, Tommye, do you have anything else you'd like to say before everyone leaves?
No, I just, again, say thank you to everybody who's been involved with this. You, Jillian, Corey, I love Corey's design for the book, BJ for having faith in me to do this, and Pam. Thank you all, and I really do love the book. Can't wait for it to get in other people's hands.
Well, thank you, everyone. Like I said, this will be available next week, and we hope you enjoyed the reading. Have a great day. Yay!
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.